Thank you, Doreen. Well, I want to say welcome to everyone to the webinar on managing grief and loss with Dr. Alan Ferzetti. My name is Lynn Coury, founder of the Sashbear Foundation, a Canadian mental health charitable organization that provides supports and skills to families. And we represent the National Alliance of BPD in Canada for Family Connection Program. The swimming community lost a few weeks ago a great swimming coach, Kevin Thorburn from Etobicoke Swim Club. Our hearts go to everyone affected by his loss and the grief that comes with it. I'm a former parent myself of a swimmer that attended the Etobicoke Swim Club. My daughter Sasha swam under Kevin for over 10 years. And we're really honored and humbled at the same time to help facilitate this webinar on grief and loss by Dr. Alan Ferzetti. I hope that you'll be able to find with this seminar useful information to help you cope with grief and loss now and in the future. Before starting this webinar, I would like to introduce you to the Olympian medalist and ESWIM alumni, Brittany Maclean. Brittany represented Canada at the 2012 and 2016 Olympics. At Rio 2016, she swam the third leg of the 4x200 freestyle relay that won Canada bronze in national record time. Without further ado, here's Brittany Maclean that will say a few words. Brittany.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Hello, everybody. Again, I appreciate that introduction. I've been in Etobicoke swimmer was an Etobicoke swimmer for 16 years. And all of those accomplishments that Lynn mentioned would not be really feasible if it weren't for the support and guidance of Coach Kevin Thorburn. A life gone tremendously too soon, but I know with confidence we will continue to remember the legacy he left and the lessons he instilled in all of us. So just because we can't be together right now, I think it's very important. Mental health is super near and dear to my heart, and I want to make sure we are all aware that we're not going through this alone. With that being said, it is my tremendous honor today to introduce our speaker. Dr. Alan Ferzetti is a PhD, an internationally recognized researcher, teacher, and supervisor of Dialectical Behavior Therapy, DBT. Director of Training in Family Services and a Senior DBT Supervisor for 3 East programs at McLean Hospital. Dr. Fruzzetti has developed many successful DBT programs for people with BPD, these are tongue twisters, related problems and emotional regulation. Programs for couples, parents, and families. His research focuses on the connections between severe psychopathology and interpersonal family processes and their interplay with emotion dysregulation. Dr. Fruzzetti is Vice Chair of the Board for the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder and is on the Board of Directors for the Linehan Institute. Now today, Dr. Fruzzetti will lead us through a session on how to manage grief and loss during these very challenging circumstances. And I'm very appreciative that he is taking the time today to provide us with some helpful strategies and resources that even if it benefits one person, it is worth our time here today. So thank you for all that are joining. And without further ado, I present you Dr. Fruzzetti. Over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Brittany, and also thanks so much, Lynn, for the nice introduction. And I would say it's a pleasure to be here, but it's really a sad situation to be here. And I'm honored that you invited me to participate in something that's really for you as a family to do, but I'm happy to try to facilitate that. There's a lot involved in grief and loss, and some of our social messages around it are not always as helpful as they might be. So I want to kind of go back and forth between doing a little bit of teaching around the emotion and the skills that we need to manage these emotions, but also doing a little practice together, grieving together, because that's something that's hard to do right now, and it's very important. So I suspect that if you're here with us now, that you're feeling a little bit of this, you're feeling a little bit brokenhearted, some grief and sadness and a sense of loss and mourning. And of course, this is completely normal. What's not normal, of course, is that we are living in very weird and difficult times. And the limitations that we have on travel, on congregating, on being able to get together and support each other, really get in the way of the things that we need to do to manage our emotions. And nothing is more acute than that, than when somebody close to us dies, because that's an enormous challenge, even in ordinary times. And I would say probably much harder now. But I also want to put this in context that everybody involved in this, of course, in some way was connected to Kevin Thorburn. You know, that he's an important person. But those aren't the only losses. Every day there are losses both related to him, but also related to all kinds of other things. Every day, every week, every month that goes by with restrictions and cancellations, we're losing things. We're losing important events, important opportunities to share things with each other, the things that we usually do. And so when we have a significant loss like this, we can't even use our ordinary, reasonably healthy grieving processes, which always involve coming together with other people, sharing stories, sharing emotion, supporting each other. So we have to use, and be very intentional and purposeful about this, we have to use new ways to manage our sadness and our grief. And in fact, being here today together is one of those ways. And this couldn't be more important in the face of the death of somebody that you love. So I want to start by, just for probably not realistically 30 seconds, but maybe 2 minutes, talking about emotion science, because that gives us the foundation for understanding how important it is to do the things we need to do to support each other and to actually allow our grief to run its natural course. So first thing I want to highlight is that emotions are actually multi-determined things. They give us information from a variety of sources. Our biology influences our emotion, but also our psychological selves, how we think about things, what we pay attention to, our attention, but also our social relationships and our cultural practices all have a role in determining what we feel, what we have. And they're things that we're doing all the time, where we're feeling different things. We don't just have an emotion. It's not just something we carry around with us. It's something that gets queued up by things around us, and we feel it, and then we move on. Now, sometimes people feel that that's kind of overwhelming. There's so many determinants of our emotional experience. But I actually think this is incredibly helpful to remember, because that means that if we can change even one piece of all of these things that determine our emotional soup, we'll have a different emotional experience. We can change our biology by getting better sleep, or eating or healthy, or getting exercise, or a variety of other things. We can change our attention, what we pay attention to and how we pay attention to it. We can change a little bit of how we think about things. We can engage in healthy cultural and social practices. Any one of those things will have a big positive impact on our emotional experience. Emotions give us unique information that our thinking system doesn't give us. We have these two parallel systems that are connected in different ways, but emotions give us information that rationality can't, and it's important to listen to it. Emotions can also be what we would call primary or secondary. A primary emotion means that it fits the situation. It's what anybody would feel in that situation, period. So when we have an experience of death, someone that we love, someone we care about, feeling sad and feeling grief is completely normative, and that's a primary emotion. When something is very dangerous, we feel scared. But sometimes those emotions get conditioned and they last longer, they linger, they stick with us, or we get stuck with them. in them. Like we might feel afraid in a situation that's not dangerous. We would call that a secondary emotion. A secondary emotion, it's conditioned, or it's because of a particular way we think or process information, and it's not actually justified by the present circumstances. That's really important because primary emotions are the emotions that are the healthiest to live through, to manage, to experience. Secondary emotions are confusing to ourselves and often to other people, and other people therefore don't always respond to our secondary emotions in ways that are helpful. I'll come back to that. Very important to know that avoiding or escaping from grief or other emotions, frankly, creates more suffering later, and that suffering grows and grows. So it's not that we have an emotion, it's more like we haven't managed it well, so it hasn't gone away, or it gets re-triggered or re-cued so easily because we haven't managed it. So managing it is the key thing. And every emotion has a natural history that's a lot like a wave. Something happens, that cues the emotion comes up, it peaks, and it comes back down on its own. It might feel like it stays up, 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 but when that happens, that means that we're re-cueing it, that we haven't allowed it to run its natural course. So a lot about what I want to talk about today is how to get out of the way of our natural course of emotion, to actually allow the natural course of grief to flow. When we think about grieving, grieving is a special kind of sadness. Grieving the loss of a loved one is when we think of that person, we have a certain amount of love, a certain amount of joy, and that prior to the loss, there was some place to go with it. There was something to do with it. But now, grief and its associated loss has no place to go. Grief and its associated joy has no place to go. The love that we feel for the person that we've lost, it doesn't really have any place to go. And this can be very, very tricky. So when we try to understand grief and loss, we have to think about what are our normal emotional reactions. Now, with all due respect to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her colleagues, I don't want to go through those stages of grief. The stages of grief aren't a terrible list of things, but it turns out that people don't go through them all, and they don't necessarily go through them in any order. So I want to talk about this from more of an emotion science perspective. So normal emotional reactions certainly include an experience of longing. Really, you may or may not have an object of the longing. You may long to see a loved one again, but it also may not be that focused. It may just be a sense of emptiness, longing, being unsettled, being dissatisfied with something, or even being irritable. This is normal in the face of loss. Feeling really sad, crying more than normal. Being disinterested in maybe certain things, maybe many things for a while, feeling lethargic, sluggish, not feeling like getting yourself going. These are normal. Now, normal doesn't mean healthy to let them stick around. They're normal. And just like any emotional wave, it's normal for them to come up and then to come down. So withdrawing for a couple of days because we just don't feel great, we're not interested in doing other things, we feel really sad and sluggish, withdrawing for a couple of days can actually be quite healthy if what we do during that time is do some healing and some distraction and allow our brains to sort of get used to some of this loss. But of course, it's not healthy to stay there for a long time. We may simply notice that we have bigger than usual emotional reactions to any situation, not just sadness, not just grief, but we might be bigger in our fear when something's dangerous. We might feel bigger in our annoyance or our anger when we don't like something. We may even notice trouble sleeping, falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, getting up too early, being tired. Might even be that we sleep too much, more than is good for us. We might notice that we have trouble paying attention, keeping our attention focused on anything. We feel like our attention's getting hijacked, either by our loss or just by other things. It's also extremely common to have vivid memories of the person that we're mourning, or the things that we might have done with the person that we're mourning, or even things that aren't quite memories. They're more imagination about what might have happened, about things that didn't happen, but might otherwise have happened in the future, but might seem very vivid and very real. These are really normal things for us to experience. It's also possible to continue to be surprised every time we wake up and notice, oh, Kevin's gone. I can't call Kevin. I won't get to see him again. I won't get to tell him this thing. I won't get to talk about this with him. A sense of disbelief, like, how's that possible? And we could end up being surprised, actually not just for a few days, but for months and months. For somebody who's been an important part of our life, that realization, oh, I can't do this. I can't just call or send a mail or a text to this person, continues to be a cue for grief, and even one of surprise. So the cues for emotion can be things or activities, things that we ordinarily might do or have done with the person, or it could be the absence of things or activities that you notice, oh, this person is not here, not available, okay? So it could be a thing or an activity. I'm doing something. In the case of many of you, I'm swimming, I'm training, and he's not around. So the act of training itself could cue up that sense of loss and sense of grief. Or maybe you're not in the pool, and maybe part of not being in the pool is there's something unsettling about it, and you're just sort of thinking about that. So the absence of it can cue up some of those emotions as well. So here's a cue, okay? So I'm going to ask you just to notice what happens when you look at this photo. What emotions come up? What sensations in your body? I'm going to assume that among possibly many others that you're feeling sadness. You're feeling something that we would call grief. Okay? Take a deep breath. Just let it be there for a minute. All right. Can you approach your own experience right now with a little curiosity? Can you step outside that lump in your throat, or your teary eyes, or a memory you're having, or a sensation or a longing that you're having? Can you step outside and just notice your own thoughts, notice your own bodily reactions, notice your own longings? Just observe them. Okay? What you're doing right now is grieving. It's healthy. And it's not enough because I'm the one that's talking instead of you. Unfortunately, this is a task that you're all going to have to do. And I hope to give you some ideas about maybe ways to go about that, and what to do with some of those intense emotions. All right, now bring your attention back. Okay, come back to me. Take another deep breath. Shake it out. Okay, what makes this harder? What made it hard to grieve? What made it hard to, really painful? What made it really painful? And maybe you had the thought, take the picture away, or you thought, I got to close my eyes, or that's too much. And maybe if you didn't, that's fine. That's great if you didn't. But if you did, some things naturally can make it harder to do the work of grieving. And one of those things is, of course, that it's painful. And because it's painful, our brains think that our brains are trying to protect us by saying, okay, nope, not going to think about that, not going to go there, nope, and we're going to escape, we're going to numb out, not pay attention to the grief that comes up. when there's a relevant cue, okay, or something that cues up our sadness. Or as we start, that wave starts to go up, we say, no, no, not now, I'm not going to do that, and we run away from it. We want to escape it. And there are a lot of ways to escape or avoid or numb out, and some of them are ordinary things, you know, like I'm just going to put on some loud music, or I'm going to play a video game, maybe play a lot of video games, or I'm going to do some online shopping for things that I really don't need. You know, those are really avoidance, and they're going to get in the way. So we have to be careful about them. I want to emphasize that sadness itself isn't the enemy. Avoiding the sadness, avoiding the cues for sadness is. That's the thing that's actually going to create much more suffering in the long run. Finding ways to allow ourselves to be sad, but to do it in doses that are not overwhelming. That's the key. So part of what makes it hard is when we self-invalidate. We invalidate our thoughts or our actions. Well, what might that look like? Like, you might have a thought like, this shouldn't bother me so much, or this shouldn't still be on my mind. It's been X days, weeks, months, however long. In fact, our emotions don't have their own timetable. One way to think about it is every time there's a cue for sadness, a picture of someone that you love, you see a picture of Kevin, you have a memory of something with him, or some other thought about him, and you feel sad, then in fact that sadness is your brain's way, your emotion system, or honestly just your way of honoring your relationship with him. That sadness honors the importance of this relationship and therefore the importance of the loss, and self-invalidating it actually makes things much, much worse, saying, oh, it shouldn't bother me. Why shouldn't it? Of course it does. How to help it along so the bothering me isn't so unpleasant, but feels more like honoring your relationship, honoring the importance of that relationship, instead of being just painful, just a mess, just feeling overwhelmed. It's also possible to mistake fear and uncertainty for loss. Okay, now I want to tread really carefully here, because this, if I'm not careful, this could sound kind of invalidating to you, and I absolutely don't mean to be. So here's the idea. The idea is that things in the future that haven't happened, okay, that might not happen, even if they're likely, or even if they're unlikely to happen, we haven't lost them yet, okay? And that uncertainty or that fear of loss in the future isn't a real loss. And if we try to start to mourn something before it's time, okay, now I'm not talking about a death now, I'm talking about other events that might be perhaps triggered, memories or hopes might be triggered. Like, oh my gosh, this might not happen in July, or this might not happen in October. The fact that it hasn't been canceled yet, some things have, but I'm talking about the ones that haven't, we don't need to mourn that. And if we try to grieve that, we will get stuck, because we can't, because there's still the possibility that it will. So for example, if you're one of those very elite and lucky few people that were planning on going to the Olympics this summer, that has been at least postponed, right? So certainly those plans for the summer are now a loss. Even though they haven't happened yet, they're clearly going to happen. Mourning that, grieving that loss makes sense now. However, it's hard to know what happens after that, when they'll be rescheduled, what they'll look like, what your role in that might be. So simply acknowledging I don't know, which is really hard to do, but the I don't know is all we do know. We know that I don't know. We know that. And being afraid of that loss is premature. Being afraid of that uncertainty and grieving uncertainty isn't helpful. It's very important to simply come back into the present and say, right now, I don't know about that. So what can I do right now? What can I do right now? Sometimes there might be things we can do to minimize the chances that things won't go the way we want, and clearly that would be the thing to do. And sometimes there's nothing we can do except wait. Social isolation makes it harder, and this is why on the one hand it's great everybody's here today. On the other hand, this is obviously not as satisfying, can't be as satisfying as being together with loved ones and sharing the loss together. So finding ways to mitigate that social isolation. Like, you know, if we had a couple of hours, I would say, let's break into some chat rooms on Zoom and let's have people who already know each other get into small groups of 2, 3, 4, 6 people and spend a half an hour and just talk about the loss and what it means to you. So I want to encourage you to do that sometime soon. We can't do that today. It's too hard to organize that, knowing who knows who and who's available. But those are things that you know. You know who some of your colleagues are, some of your peers are, and anybody on this call could be somebody that you could connect with around your sadness. It's also going to get really hard if you don't talk about the loss, if you don't talk about your sadness. Talking about it, expressing it accurately, allowing those waves to come up and go back down, that's what successful grieving looks like. And not doing that, not talking, means we don't do it. But of course, when we talk about it, we run the risk that the other person's going to minimize our loss. Say, well, why is this such a big deal to you? Or why is this still bothering you after all this time? All this time could be like since last week. But in the future, it could be months, it could be longer, it could be next year, and you could still feel sad. So it's important to pick people who aren't going to be invalidating. And for sure, that's most likely to be people who share some of that grief and loss. But other people can be validating too, even if they don't have that experience of sadness themselves, especially if you tell them what you need. I really just need you to listen and know what I'm going through. That is all. That's often enough. It's also harder when we have cumulative losses, and that's certainly the circumstances that we're in right now. We've got all these losses all around us. We've lost all kinds of activities. We've lost opportunities to do things. Every time we don't have dinner with a friend that we would have had, that's a loss. The fact that we can have dinner with a friend someday in the future, and I'm sure that day will come, that doesn't minimize the loss now. Maybe somebody had a birthday a couple of weeks ago. That birthday celebration, even if you do it later, it's lost. The one that you would have had is gone, and that's hard, and that's something also to grieve. And so when we're already grieving all these rather ordinary but very important losses, and then when we have on top of it, or those on top of the death of somebody that we care about, it gets really overwhelming at times. So healthy grieving means we have to manage this fear and uncertainty. It means noticing in our minds that we haven't experienced the loss. If we haven't done it yet. And right now, today, in this moment, that's in the future, and we just don't know. So keeping that uncertainty from overwhelming us, because we just don't know. We haven't got there yet. When there are things we can do to minimize outcomes that we don't want, by all means, we should do that. We should problem solve. We should make changes to minimize the danger and the risk of losing things. But then once we've done those things, it's time to say, okay, I've done what I can. I've solved whatever problems I can for today. Now stop. I'm done with that for today. That is not a good use of my energy. That's not a primary emotion right now. Grief and loss hasn't happened yet. I might be feeling it, but it's a false sense of grief. It's not going to be helpful. I can't actually grieve successfully something that hasn't been lost. Then we got to turn our mind around and notice what we do have, what is in front of us, what we have, and what what we can do right now, not what we might lose in the future, and throw ourselves into that. It's very important not to avoid the cues. So if you've had a photo on your phone, don't for a while take that photo off. If you're an old person like me and you keep real photos around, not just digital ones on your phone, now is not the time to take those pictures down. Maybe later, when we've successfully grieved, we can find another place for them. But taking them down because it's so painful to see, just leave it there, and I'll talk about how to deal with it. When we avoid those cues, it means that we aren't processing our emotions, and it kind of nags at us, and it builds, and it gets worse, and it interferes with our ability. It's kind of like it clogs up our emotion system. And so when we bump into other cues, that sadness is right there, unprocessed, and it's hard to then feel the other emotions that we are going to have over the course of our day, including joy and interest and satisfaction, but all kinds of emotions that we need to feel. And it can make us less energetic and more shut down, which just makes everything worse. It's also really important to take care of our bodies. We have to balance our sleep, our eating, get exercise. And when I say balance sleep, that means find that sweet spot, enough sleep, not too little, not too much. Eating, whatever's healthy for you. Exercise, whatever's healthy for you. And then soothing. Soothing is really important. If you think about soothing, what soothing really means is that we take a particular sense. It could be visual, sound, smell, taste, tactile, could be anything, and we do something that's really pleasant for that sense. And so tasting something and really taking the time to notice the taste. Sleeping, enjoying your pillow. I hope you have the world's most comfortable, wonderful pillow that when you lie down, you can just enjoy your pillow. Okay? Exercise. Do things that you enjoy doing and you enjoy the effects of. Those are all ways to take care of your body and soothe your senses. Now, even though we might be overwhelmed by losses, because not only do we have the grief and loss around a death, and of course at this moment in time, depending on where you live, it may not only be the loss of Kevin, who was an important person for you, but it may be also that with the pandemic going on, you have experienced another loss of life. That would be, I don't know, not just doubly difficult, but probably quadruply difficult. It's kind of exponentially difficult. But then there are all these other losses, like we didn't get to have a birthday party for grandma or grandpa, or, you know, whatever it might have been. We didn't get to go out for pizza on our usual Friday night pizza, you know, whatever it is, all those things. Each of those things, we have to take a moment and allow ourselves a few moments of grieving for each piece, taking them one at a time to not be overwhelmed. Now, the key here is, of course, to allow our emotional experience. Remember I said how these things are really waves, right? So we've got to bring our attention to the wave, okay? So I want to do this right now. So I want you to maybe close your eyes. Obviously, nobody's looking at you. Close your eyes and conjure up a memory of something that you've lost lately. Maybe it's a memory of Kevin, but maybe it's a memory of something else that you were looking forward to that you couldn't do because of the pandemic, or some other loss that you've experienced. Now, as you cue that up and you notice it, that memory, that thought, you get in your mind's eye, take a deep breath, okay? Notice it. What is that emotion? Notice that it's sadness. It's grief. Label it accurately. That's what that is. Allow it to be there for a minute, okay? Stay right here in this presence. moment. This is not nothing dangerous going on here, okay? It's just us and our emotions. Our emotions are giving us information that we've experienced a loss. And it hurts. Allow the hurt to come and go. Come and go. Remember, emotions are like waves. So if we allow our sadness to rise and fall like a wave, we start to participate in the sadness and the grieving process in a really healthy way. So, all right, so go ahead and you can open your eyes up again if you haven't already. It turns out that emotions fire for something like 3 to 9 seconds. That's the neurobiological emotional firing, is all those neurons go up and then they come down. Something happens, they get triggered, they get queued up, they rise, and then they go down. That's what emotions do, because they are fundamentally, at a biological level, there are neurons. Of course, emotions are far more than the biology of them. They're also our attention and our sensations and our memories and how we think about it and our actions. But if we pair allowing that emotion to come up, okay, so now again, re-cue that memory. As you breathe in, allow that wave to go up, and now breathe out and allow the emotion to come down. Now, I would recommend that you do this for 2 or 3 breaths. Okay, do it again. Cue up that emotion, that memory. Remember something. Think about something, looking at a picture. Allow the emotion to come up. And then breathe out and allow the emotion to go down. And one more time. Cue, emotion goes up as you inhale. And then allow the emotion to go down as you exhale. Now the key thing, right, is now you've been allowing the sadness. You've been honoring the sadness and what it means, okay? You've got these losses, right? For many of you, here's another cue. What do you notice? Allow it. One more. There's a cue. Okay, now it's really important to self-soothe. Let that memory go, let that thought go. Then notice something in your body. What could you self-soothe? Can you stretch? Can you stretch a little bit? Bring your attention to stretching out your neck and your shoulders. Can you take your dominant hand and rub the palm of your non-dominant hand with your thumb? That's actually a very soothing thing for most people. Do you have something around that you can drink? Can you have a little coffee, a little tea, a glass of water? Can you taste it? Can you notice the sensations and the emotions associated with this soothing activity? So this is the transition. We allowed the emotion for a few breaths, and now we're going to allow our brain to cool off by refocusing on something that's pleasant and totally in our control. Any sense, okay? Again, it could just be for 2 or 3 breaths, or it could be for longer. You could, not right now, but at another time, you might decide to go play a song, a soothing song, and listen to it. Really bring your attention to that song, okay? While you're self-soothing, it's very important to validate your own experience. Today, of course I feel this way. Of course I'm sad. Of course I'm grieving. And compassion says, how would I treat someone I love if someone I love were going through this kind of grieving process? What would I do? I would say, of course. And I would simply allow that person to be there. I would keep that person company, provide some companionship. I might provide some soothing. We can do that for ourselves. We can validate our own experience. We can show compassion to ourselves by noticing our own experience and soothing it. sadness and grief do make sense. Anybody could feel this way under these circumstances. That's the key. There's nothing invalid about it. Of course, a person would feel this way. Of course. How could anybody feel different? It's also important to seek validation and support from other people and grieve together. We're doing a little bit of that today, but I really want to encourage you to do some more of that on your own. In small groups, large groups, one-on-one. You might have to be creative, but you're certainly going to have to be purposeful and flexible. It may not be as satisfying to do it on a video chat or on the telephone or on an email or on a text, but it's not bad. It's working. It'll do. You might have to do it a little more. You might have to really throw yourself into it, but it's absolutely essential that you do that. It's very important to talk about your grief and loss and to talk about it in a descriptive way. I feel sad. I keep remembering this. I think about that, and I feel sad. You don't have to analyze it. For sure, do not second guess yourself. Don't minimize. Don't self-invalidate. And for heaven's sake, if your emotions go someplace else, like getting angry, getting irritable, say, that's just my brain not liking me feeling sad. That's just, yes, of course I'm sad. And that tells you you need to do more soothing, more self-validation, and get more validation from others, as well as moving on to bringing your attention to other people and respond in validating and supportive ways to other people. Be curious about their experience. What's it like for you? Is it similar to what it's like for me? Doesn't have to be the same. Could be a little the same and a little different. Could be very different. Now, it's important to recognize that this fundamental process of how we express ourselves and doing it accurately in ways that other people can understand, that's what gets us connected to other people. And it's this connection that all this so-called social distancing is getting in the way of, right? The connection is you express yourself accurately. This is what I'm noticing. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. And you describe it, because if you describe it, the other person, oh yeah, I understand that. And when they understand it, what they do in response is validate. They say, oh yeah, of course. Or I feel that way too. Or gee, that makes sense. Or whatever that is, okay? In the same way that if somebody else expresses themselves accurately, it's easier to understand and it's easier to be supportive and validating. But of course, that requires that we have to manage our emotion first, right? Meaning that if we go off saying, I'm so angry, I'm so pissed off at the world, it's very hard for people to say, yeah, I'm sad too. Or of course you're sad, because you're not saying it. You're not connecting it to the origins, to the cues for your sadness. And at the same time, if somebody's expressing their sadness to you, it's important to manage your emotions, to be able to listen, to really pay attention and be curious. Gee, what's it like for you? Because if we come to understand it, we can validate. But if our own emotion gets in the way, we're not really paying attention to the other person. What we do know is this validating process is the biggest thing that we have to soothe emotion. Validation is the single biggest, most effective way to soothe another person's emotion. And actually, it's much more effective than anything we do for ourselves. It clearly creates a kind of connection. Not always joy, but a kind of contentment, even if there's shared sadness and grief. Now, this last step, I can't emphasize enough, because if we do all those first things, and I've gone through 10 of them already, if we do them all, what might happen is then we immediately then get re-cued again, and then it feels like we get stuck going over and over and over the same ground. What we have to do is say, okay, I've grieved this enough for now. Doesn't mean I won't come back to it this afternoon or tonight or tomorrow or next week, but for right now, that's satisfying enough. It's satisfying enough. It's a big enough amount. There's no virtue in being overwhelmed. So I've got to, in fact, now activate or reactivate and throw myself into something else. I've got to bring my attention and my focus and my curiosity to the next thing in my day. That's something I actually have in front of me. That could be reading a newspaper or a book, or it could be talking to a friend about something else, or it could be working or exercising or cooking dinner or watching a movie, playing with kids. Could be anything. Could be absolutely any activity that would be an ordinary part of your day, whatever it is that you'd be doing next. And then you really got to throw yourself into it. You got to take your mind with you. You got to engage in it, in what you can do, and bring your full attention, bring your mind with you to this new activity. So you've grieved, you've had some waves, you've allowed it, you might come back to it, but for now you're not going to grieve. You're choosing to grieve, and then you're choosing, I'm not going to grieve now. Now what happens is over time is as the cues come up, as you grieve successfully, the next time you have that same cue, it won't feel as big. Okay, over time, the amplitude of the wave, how big that wave is, how much sadness you have, will go down. It'll shrink. Okay, and the time in between the waves will get bigger. So, for example, if you think about, if you're old enough to have experienced a previous loss, you know, so if I think about my grandmother who died a long time ago, and I loved my grandmother. She was a lovely woman. She died a long time ago. As I bring her up in this moment, the wave of sadness is there, but it's pretty small. But the day after she died, it was pretty big. The week after she died, it was pretty big, but not as big as the day, and so forth. The wave gets a little smaller over time. It might get big again on an anniversary or birthday, or on a particular occasion, but it won't overwhelm us anymore. While we're doing whatever we're doing in our day, it's important to savor that experience, to throw ourselves into the day. If you're, for heaven's sake, if you're making dinner, enjoy making dinner. If you're talking to a friend about something, enjoy talking to your friend. If you're watching a movie, enjoy the movie. Whatever that is, notice your senses, get your entire self involved in it. And mix familiar things with new and interesting things that are stimulating. Familiar is predictable and it's soothing. New and interesting is curious and engaging. Okay, it's very important to do some of both. You can mix the high energy things with the low key things. Mix things that you do on your own with things that are more social. And always be purposeful. Direct your attention. If you find yourself wandering off into suffering, into uncertainty and fear, say, nope, not now, and bring yourself back. If there are things about the future that you need to problem solve, like, gee, I just don't seem to be able to get myself to exercise, problem solve it. Figure out what you need to do. Do you need to schedule it? Do you need to do that on a video chat so you're getting exercise the same time somebody else is? What do you need? Gee, I feel too isolated. Well, by all means, problem solve. Go spend some time structuring more relationship time. Share your new experiences and share your new emotions too. Not just your grieving, but your new emotions, your joy, your excitement, frustrations, things you don't like. It's important to share those as well. So I imagine for many of you, this is an image that has probably mixed emotions, I'm guessing. You probably have some associated joy and excitement, but also some sense of loss. And as we think about this, these are the kinds of images that might be very helpful to you to pop in front of you, you know, once a day, every few days, to make sure you're practicing both the joy part and the disappointment and the grief part. It's also absolutely essential that of course you love and support each other through this. As you're doing all these other things, loving and supporting each other is a key component. It's the glue that gives us the motivation to do these other hard parts. If you do it together, it's easier, it's more soothing, and you have the benefits of that validating experience that's so satisfying for everybody. All right, I want to stop here. We have some time left to take questions.
Dr. Fruzzetti, I want to say thank you for this amazing, helpful, soothing presentation. Like, I would like, Doreen is on right now. Doreen is with Sashbear. And then Doreen, can you share maybe some of the questions we receive? And then if you have questions for those that arrive a little bit later, you can see at the bottom of your screen, there's Q&A. You can send a question there. If we don't have time to answer it today, we'll make sure that we take the information and then we'll send it to Dr. Fruzzetti for him to answer, and then we'll reply back to you. Doreen?
Great. So the first question that came in to me was somebody who has suffered a series of losses over an extended period of time. So deaths of close family members, having left the country where she grew up, not having been able to attend funerals for a lot of these people. And so they've built up over a number of years. And for most of these situations, she hasn't felt the opportunity to be able to grieve and has carried, I think, some blame around some of the circumstances for that. And what she has found is that she's stuck now in more distant past because there's been such a long series of losses. So she's just wondering how to move on from this.
Yeah, this is really, really hard. You know, in some ways, that cumulative grief and loss can start to feel a lot like trauma, because we talk about cumulative trauma. There's also cumulative grief. If this person has somebody close that he or she can start to unpack it one piece at a time, do a few minutes every day, but with just one thing, that could be very helpful. If this person doesn't have somebody who's really can do that, I would suggest getting a therapist and get some grief counseling, because being able to get some support in that grieving, because I'm sure it feels like an entire mountain. And it may not feel to him or her like, gee, if I can just take one piece of it that's manageable without pulling the whole thing out on top of me. If you can do one piece at a time on your own, that's great. And I would just encourage you to be vigilant and take one piece today and another piece on Saturday and a couple of, another piece in a few days after that. But if not, get a grief counselor, get a therapist to help you with this, because you'll need help getting a manageable sized piece, but you also need to be able to then turn it, leave it behind, and throw yourself into what you have now, not only the losses, and have it be that your brain doesn't feel like that's a contradiction. Because you do, whoever you are, and my heart goes out to you, there are things in your life now that you have. They may not seem very meaningful because of all those losses. But they are. It's the losses are overwhelming, and finding the present meaning is part of the healthy way to then grieve the very real and terrible losses.
Thank you. So the next question then is about when you're already feeling quite dysregulated and you're in a situation where, because of the COVID lockdown right now, you're in a family situation where there's a lot of dysregulation, and on top of this there's now another unexpected loss. And how do you find the best timing to share with another family member in the household? So in this case, it happened to be the death of a pet that was unexpected. So you're adding this extra piece on and sharing it with somebody who's already dysregulated and struggling. Yeah,
well, so there's a couple of parts to this, and of course I don't know the situation, but I do want to emphasize though that being dysregulated is really a kind of out of control emotion, and that's not the same as having a lot of emotion. People can have a lot of emotion and not be dysregulated. So it's possible, and grief is a great example of that, right? We across the planet, different cultures have different procedures, different rituals around grieving, and they often involve really a lot of expression of emotion that are totally appropriate to those cultures and to those moments. There could be a lot of emotion, but that doesn't mean that the person's dysregulated. If you're crying a lot, what we might say is crying uncontrollably at a funeral, say, that's actually not dysregulated emotion. That's the place to cry. You got the support there. Other people are crying too. That's actually a perfectly healthy thing to do in that situation. It's crying uncontrollably and not being able to go to work. That's dysregulated. So it may be that just tiptoeing in, not in a bad way, but just saying, hey, I've been feeling really sad about this. Are you up for talking about it? I imagine you've been feeling sad too. Just broaching that topic would be the way to start. And recognizing that, A, it might be very good for both of you to be able to share that grief together. But then it's also possible that it's not, that you're going to actually have to get support for your grieving from somebody else who's not right in the middle of it also, at least for now. It may be another few days or a few weeks before the other person's grief comes down enough and is regulated enough that you can share that grieving process.
Thank you. Someone else has asked about just dealing with themselves again, so much sense of overwhelm with everything that's going on right now, and so much grief and loss, that even though they have skills, DBT type skills through family connections, the skills that you've shared today, they feel like they're just at such a low ebb. So the words used were, the empathy bucket is so low, my pain is so high, and I'm experiencing so much fatigue that I can't find it within myself to use these skills.
Yeah, this is unfortunately, our circumstances right now are understandably overwhelming for many, many, many people. There's a couple of possibilities here. And again, I don't know the details of that, but it sounds to me like this person could benefit a lot from, how would I say this, some parallel skill use. So for example, it might be that Doreen, you and I, that we barely know each other, okay, but you and I, if we knew each other even a little, we could say, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Could we just sit and wiggle our, this is going to sound very silly, of course, and just wiggle our toes together on Zoom, and just wiggle our toes and just talk about like how comfortable our feet are right now. Now, I don't want to sound invalidating. I know that's this bizarre and small, but that starts, okay, now our brain has, if we can wiggle our toes and feel good with our feet in our socks or our slippers or our shoes, and they're just the right temperature, and we're paying attention to that, your support to do that at the same time I'm doing it, and my support to help you do it at the same time, that gives us both a 3 or 4 minute break in our brains, just enough maybe to bring, metaphorically, our temperature down. Okay, it's not, our brains obviously don't overheat, but it can sure feel like they do. And if we can bring the intensity down a little bit, then we can move on to some distraction together. Maybe, you could tell me something about, your life that's not terrible right now, something that you're looking forward to. So you tell me what you had for breakfast or what you're going to make for dinner. And I could do the same. Again, it's not that this solves the problem. It gives our brain a break from this overwhelm. And so maybe we could do that for 20 or 30 minutes. And then I have enough motivation to do one skill around one thing that's been overwhelming me. The key with overwhelm, of course, overwhelm means that I've got bouncy brain, that my attention is bouncing from one cue for a negative emotion to the next cue for a negative emotion to the next cue for a negative emotion without managing any of them. And then they just accumulate, and that's what overwhelm is. When we can cool ourselves down, we can then choose to just pay attention to one thing. And then we have the skills to manage that one thing, whether it's problem solving it, simply allowing it to be there and validating ourselves or validating each other. Those are the key things. It's to make it smaller, because who in the world can handle, seriously, any of us, I don't know anybody who can handle bouncing from one cue for negative emotion to another without getting overwhelmed. That is the definition emotionally of overwhelmed. So you know, welcome to the species, and this is really hard, you know, and I just encourage you to make it really, really small, and go from there. And of course, if you can't do that, then get professional help, somebody who's disentangled from that same emotion, who can stay solid for you and help you do it.
Dr. Fruzzetti, I think we could keep you with us the whole afternoon. Like, the questions are keeping coming, and I think we're going to look at them on the side and then answer them afterwards. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, to be with the swimming community, to share your knowledge about the grief and loss. And thank you for helping us to understand better grief and what grief is associated with. Like the fact that we lost our coach, Kevin, it's not easy to, I guess, accept and to go through it, and then to recognize all the cumulative losses that comes with it as well. And I'm sure I go with everybody else too, that appreciate all the knowledge and the steps that you provided with us, and the skills and the tools to really understand better how to manage it, and then to help us recognize the impact of our losses, to be able to experience at this point more healthy grieving, right? And to be able to create or to experience great memories with our coach, Kevin. So thank you so much. For those that have questions, we're gonna keep them and answer you through email. And then I want to say thank you so much, and have everyone a peaceful afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Good luck, everybody. I'm very sorry for your loss. Hang in there. It's going to get better. Be skillful. Take care.
Thank you.